Today we are going to be talking about how to negotiate a deal as a buyer. My name's Connor, I'm a realtor in Austin. The first thing you need to know when you're buying a house is when to negotiate. So some people come in and it's their first time buying a home and they think you can negotiate whenever you want throughout the process. And technically you can negotiate up until the closing day. There are specific times where it is most common to negotiate. It's very advantageous for you to target these times specifically because it's not going to be very well received on the other side. The other realtor will, get the phone call, they're saying, hey, the buyers want to negotiate again. The seller's realtor is going to say, no, we've already gone through this, we're already past the deadline, no. And there's a specific cadence to it that if you want a good result, you really need to follow this cadence. So the first time you're going to negotiate is when you're putting in the offer. So in the offer, there's more than just purchase price. There is about 25 different fields that actively require you to input one thing or the other, and you can negotiate on pretty much all of these. So other than price, you have length of time to do your option period or your inspections. You have closing date. You have seller concessions. You have who pays for the survey, who pays for the title policy. There's a myriad of things that you need to be negotiating when you're putting in the offer. And you need to be double checking that as a buyer, because if you don't double check it, your realtor is just filling out the default. So for example, if my buyer says they want to put in an offer, I will ask them probably 5 or 6 different inputs they want. Purchase price, option period, option fee, earnest money, closing date. Now, there's still about 20 other things to negotiate on, but I don't specifically ask all of them what they want to put in. I just default to having the seller pay for the maximum amount of possible and saving my buyer the maximum amount of possible. So I don't need to go through each individual item. I'm just going to do what's best for my client. So that's personally how I do it. You need to double check with your realtor how they do it. So first time to negotiate is during the offer. And like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can touch on. So you got to double check your contract. Once you get an offer accepted, the second time you're going to negotiate is during the option period. In Texas, we have what's called the option period. In other states, this is called the inspection period. Now, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit of nuance, but they're essentially the same thing. You have a period of time where you are allowed to go do your inspections on the property to make sure it's in the condition you expect it to be in. Once you get the inspection done, you get any additional inspections you might want, like mold inspection, foundation inspection. You get all the inspections you want done. Let's cut that, let's put it out. So once you get all of the inspections you want done, then as a buyer, you go to the seller and you negotiate again. And at this time, you're basically saying, hey, I didn't know, that half of the outlets don't work. I need money to fix that. So it's things that you couldn't know about just from walking through the property 1 or 2 times. Where people go wrong is they try to negotiate for things that they knew when they were touring the property. For example, let's say you are buying a house that the sellers were going to redo the bathroom. They never got around to it. They demoed it and then they left it empty for a year. As you're walking through the house to purchase, you are going into that bathroom and you will see it is empty. There's no tub, there's no sink, there's no shower, it's nothing. It's bare bones. If you try to renegotiate that later, they're going to say, no, you walked in that room, you knew the condition, you're buying it as is, So that's definitely something to know, is if it's readily visible, the current condition, typically sellers will not give you any sort of negotiating on that piece. Now there are some things like a roof, for example, where it's old, but you don't know the current condition unless you get up on the roof and you need a specialist. So there's a little gray area where some things, can be fiddled with a little bit is a good way to put it. Once you get your inspection back and you're going through this negotiating process, there are 3 steps that you need to make sure goes into the negotiation. So if you're a buyer, you got to make sure your realtor is doing this. So there's this 3-step process to negotiating the findings in the inspection. Step 1 is identifying the problem. So the inspector is going to do this. You got to make sure that if there's an additional inspection needed, that you get it done. For example, the general inspector will say, hey, it looks like there's some organic growth in this bathroom. They love the term organic growth. They'll never say it's mold because they're not 100% sure. So they'll say it's an organic growth. You need to then get a mold test to double check that it is actually mold. So step 1, identify the problem. Step 2, explain the problem to the listing agent, to the seller. You explain, hey, it's this type of mold, it's located in this spot. Step 3 is come up with a price needed to remedy the issue. Now this is where tons of people go wrong and they are leaving money on the table. They assume just by saying there's organic growth right here that they will get $20,000 off for no reason whatsoever. A month ago, I was sitting in my office, typing away, doing my work. The agent next to me gets a phone call. Now he has this property listed for sale. It's around $750,000. The inspection just came back and the buyer is asking for a $50,000 decrease in price. The buyer's agent says, hey, there's a foundation issue, the plumbing's bad, and the electrical's bad. $50,000. The first question out of this agent's mouth is, okay, what proof do you have? The buyer's agent didn't have proof. They only had a general inspection and whatever that brought with it. They didn't have any expert opinion on it. The second question he asked is, how much is that gonna cost? Again, they had nothing. So I sat next to this agent, and over the course of a few phone calls over 30 minutes, the buyers were asking for $50,000 off, and they ended up settling for nothing. Now, I know that they could have probably gotten 5, 10, 15,000 off on this property, but the buyer's agent did not have any proof to hand over. And when there's no proof, you get no discounts. So it is extremely important that you have an accurate cost estimate, you know what's going on, and you know how to explain the problem to the other side. So that is when you negotiate during the option period. Now, the majority of all negotiations start in the initial offer and in the option period. The final time where negotiations really happen is going to be when the appraisal comes back. Now, this isn't super common, but it does happen where the appraisal amount comes back different than the negotiated purchase price amount, and things need to be sorted out. So typically this is the last chance you have to negotiate a price reduction or figure out some sort of solution to allow the transaction to go through. So once you get past the appraisal, you're clear to close, everything's going good, and you just purchase yourself a home. The final thing you need to know about good negotiation is that you always need to be learning. I was driving around East Austin between showings and turned on a real estate podcast and was listening to the podcast host, who is an agent, talk about how he uses current market conditions to negotiate a better deal for his buyers. Now this got me thinking, how could I possibly use this in the current people that I'm touring the house with? We had seen 3 houses already that day. We had 2 more lined up. And I thought, this podcast came out today. It's very relevant information. How can I use this if they find the home that they like? We finish up the tours, we go home, I get a call from them the next morning. And they say, hey, the 4th house we toured, we really loved. We want to go ahead and put in an offer on it. I said, great, what do you want to offer? The home was listed at $1 million. They wanted to offer $900,000. So we submitted the offer, and then later that day they came back and they countered with $950,000. I picked up the phone, I called the buyers, and they said $950 is okay, we're okay with that purchase price, let's go ahead and accept their counter. Now, as I'm sitting there in my office chair, I'm on the phone with them and I'm looking out the window, and it was a moment where I was thinking back to what I heard in the podcast yesterday between my showings with this couple. And I thought, how can I use the current market conditions to get a better price? So I said to this buyer, give me one more shot. I know you're okay with $950, but I really think I could get them down to $925. And they said, well, we got nothing to lose, so go ahead. So I called up the listing agent and I said, hey, thank you so much for the counter offer. They're comfortable right now at $925. They're kind of afraid of what the market might do in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we're gonna stick right here, and if things work out well, we'll reevaluate this transaction. A couple hours later, we hear back from the listing agent, and the seller dropped it from $950 down to $925. We got it under contract. So moral of this story is that there's always something to learn, and you need to make sure that whoever is representing you in this purchase transaction is constantly learning new tricks, new negotiation tactics, because you never know what's going to work and how much money you could potentially save. That's it for this video. There's 3 things we talked about. 1 is when to negotiate. 2 is how to have good proof when negotiating. And 3, always be learning. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.